Alright, how y'all doing? I've been gone for a little while, but I've been busy. I've been working. I have a regular job and I've been working. But I got a few hours off today and I thought I'd pound out a video. I love doing this so much and I appreciate you being patient with me. So here's a new video. If you'll listen at the end of this video, I'm going to explain kind of what's going on and what all I'm into these days. Might give you a better picture of what's going on. So hang on to the end if you're interested in hearing me yak. Right now, let's get on with these stories. All right, here we go. Before we get started with these stories, let me give a few seconds to my good friend Kat Ward at the Paranormal Heart podcast. I love her podcast. I'll link it below in the description, and I'll have one of her videos on the end screen at the end of this video. Thanks.
Hey everyone, I'm Kat Ward, host of Paranormal Heart Podcast. Join me on the second and last Sunday of each month as I speak with people who share their paranormal experiences. We cover ghosts, cryptids, aliens, and so much more. You can find me on Podbean, YouTube, New Lantern Media, Apple Podcasts, and any place you find fine podcasts.
Okay, here's a short story by Sandra. Sandra sent this in a while back. Here's what she writes. I live in a small community of Clouds Creek, and we have a lot of Bigfoot activity. My friends and I go out and we squatch on any given night, and we're never disappointed. There's a place that we call Woodhaven, and within it, you can find a lot of signs of Bigfoot, tree markings, X structures, and tracks. Most who live in the area have experienced or heard him holler. We know there are more than one unit living within here, and yes, some have even ventured into our yards and on our decks. One night, my friends and I all gathered at my house here in Clouds Creek to head out and do some squatching. Before we left, 20 people had joined us. We left 2 hours after we ate, and I left my recorder going, hoping to get a good recording of him hollering. We headed out to the pines, which is our starting point on most excursions. We all stood outside our vehicles waiting to hear him holler, and it didn't take long before we heard something heavy walking in the woods close by. The steps were quick and limbs snapped as the thing moved towards us. The movement kept up for 15 minutes and abruptly stopped, and it was standing just inside the trees. It was pretty spooky, really. Leaves began rustling again, and then it began knocking on a tree trunk. The sound was amazing, being so close. So what did we do? Of course, we moved over to a tree close by and began knocking back. More wood knocks were coming now from other locations. Some we estimated as far as a mile away. It was almost continuous for 15 minutes, and now we were a few yards away from our cars, and small rocks began landing in front of the cars, and some went over our heads. And there was the telltale odor we all hear so much about. We experienced Bigfoot in this location with all of our senses, with the exception of seeing one. But they were so close, we agreed that we had been in this location long enough. We didn't want to intrude any more than we already had, so we loaded up and we left. No need to anger the beast or get anyone hurt. We moved to another area that we knew had activity. Now at the new location, we all sat in our cars with the engines off and we listened with open windows. Coyotes began calling all around us. I don't know how close they were. A coyote's call can travel a long distance, but they were pretty close. Among all the coyote chatter, we heard something imitating the coyote calls, but with a much deeper voice. These were notes a coyote could not make. The calling stopped, and we could clearly hear chatter from the squatches. You cannot mistake those noises. As I mentioned earlier, that night before we left, I started a recording device on my back deck. I do this sometimes when there's been activity around the house. Upon returning home, I played the sounds from the recorder for everyone. Something big was clearly walking up the stairs of the deck. Within a few seconds, the recorder picked up this thing sniffing the audio recorder. Deep inhales as it got my scent from the recorder and vocal exhales. The creature did this several times before the recorder captured it walking back down the steps. A minute went by on the recording, and then we caught the same animal, we think it was the same animal, roar or howl not far away. It actually scared us knowing that we were sitting on the deck where a Bigfoot had been in the last 3 hours. These events happen often in our area. The word has gotten out that Bigfoot is here, and they're very vocal, so people come into the area a lot to listen for them. On some nights, cars will be parked along the roads, their lights turned off, and they just sit there hoping to hear one sound off. Our area has become a Bigfoot hotspot. Oh, that's a cool story. Sounds like your whole community are like squatchers. 20 people over for a squatching excursion and a dinner? That actually sounds like a lot of fun to me. That's very interesting to be so close. You're standing there, 20 of you standing there at the edge of the woods, and you can hear it right in there. And I think it was good that you guys left, although I don't know much about Sasquatch behavior, but it sounds reasonable. Sounds reasonable to me when they're so close and you've been there long enough to go ahead and leave. And then the coyotes and the recording on your porch is just so cool, so cool. Sandra, thanks for the email. It was great, and we all enjoyed it. Here's a story from Steven. Y'all are going to love this one. I've waited several decades to tell this story. It happened in the early 1990s and turned out to be the strangest camping trip I had ever been on. I did not even own a camera back then. I was raised in the mountains of Idaho, so hunting and camping were the main hobbies. Over the years, I found my favorite hunting and camping spot. It took about 3.5 hours to drive there, but it was in the remote backcountry of central Idaho with very few roads and almost no people. In fact, over 40 plus years of going there, I have yet to see another person in the mile-long meadow. The location looks very much the same today as it did when I first visited. The road to get to the spot is closed for snow 4 months out of the year. At the time of this event, I was in my 30s. The main reason I have not told this story was because I had just started work at the Idaho Fish and Game in Boise. I knew without a lot of physical evidence of a sighting, you would be known as a crackpot. It was early May, and my soon-to-be ex-wife and my dog KC and I decided to do a 3-day camping trip that would end on Sunday to our favorite spot. My ex-wife was also raised in the woods and was very much in tune with nature. She was more of a woods person than I was, which is saying a lot. She was raised at a mountaintop mining cabin that had been in her family for 3 generations. The weather had been very warm for this time of year, and I found out that they were going to open the road early. We planned to be there when it opened. The campsite was secluded to the maximum and was at the end of an old abandoned logging road that bordered the meadow on 3 sides. From the campsite, you could see the only road into the camping spot, so any approaching vehicles would be seen far before they got there. We were hoping to be one of the first ones to camp in the meadow for the year. Judging by the lack of tire tracks going into the campsite, we expected to see no one. And that was the case. until the last day. The strangeness started on the drive up. KC, our yellow lab, was with us. He had been playing with the kids early in the week and he had gotten hit by a car. He seemed okay for a day or two, so we decided to take him with us. However, when the road started to get rough, he started to cough up blood and he couldn't breathe. This happened about 20 miles from the campsite, and the nearest vet was over an hour and a half away. He passed away within 10 minutes of showing discomfort. It was tragic and heartbreaking. We decided to continue to camp and to roll up KC in a tarp until we could return him home to be buried. So we wrapped him up and put him in a cool shaded area. At 6,000 feet elevation, there were still a few shaded snowbanks that had not melted yet, so I found one about 30 yards away from camp, and I covered KC with 3 feet of snow. The next 3 days were a normal camping trip. We maxed out fishing every day and had a great fish dinner every night. 2 of the days we drove to the hot springs 5 miles away and would spend several hours there relaxing. And except for losing a family member in KC, it was an excellent camping trip. That all turned around Saturday morning. We started to break down camp as we were on our way out. It was about 8:30 a.m. when I spotted, of all things, a VW van driving up the road. It was unusual, so I put my side pistol on. I also had a rifle and a shotgun within reach. The van was out of place because the road was almost a 4-wheel drive only type. The van stopped and parked 100 yards from our camp. He just sat there for 10 minutes without getting out, and we expected him to turn around. He didn't, though. The van just kept coming, having difficulty in several spots on the rough road. He stopped 25 yards away, got out, and started to walk towards the camp with his head down. "Do you need any help?" I asked. He didn't say anything, nor did he look up. So I asked again, only louder, "Do you need any help?" Again, he said nothing. He walked within a few feet, and then he looked up to me and said, "I have a few questions for you." The first thing I noticed was how pale his skin was and his gangly appearance. He was at least 6'6" tall and could only have weighed 150 pounds. He was sweating in this cold weather. It was very strange. He was wearing a baseball cap and a shirt that was untucked and too short for his frame. He didn't appear to be carrying a weapon. It looked like this guy had gotten dressed in the dark. Everything was wrong about the way he was dressed. Nothing fit or matched. He looked up at me and he asked, "Where are all the people? When will they be back?" I told him that camping season had just started and that we were the first and only people there. He didn't like my answer, so he walked towards my wife and asked her the same thing. "Where are all the people and when will they be back?" She told him of some campers we saw driving back from the hot springs about 2 miles back. Perhaps that was who he was looking for. He replied, "Do you think they know where all the people are?" She said, "Well, they will know more than we do." He seemed confused by her answer, so she added, "You will not know until you ask them." I then asked him where he was from. I noticed the Idaho license plate. He said that he was from a town that matched the license plates, and that was a relief. Then I asked, "Well, who are you looking for? What are their names?" He said he forgot their names, but asked again while looking around, "Where are all of the people?" He started to make me nervous when I noticed that he was staring at my pistol. A couple of times when he was talking to my wife and walking around the camp, I noticed that he tried to get behind me. I would move so that I was always facing him. When I would ask a question, it took him several seconds to respond. He was awfully slow in everything he did. Finally, I had had enough, and I said, "Look, we're packing up to leave. We need to get back to town this morning." If you came an hour earlier, you could have had coffee and we could talk a while, but we need to get packed up and go." He stared at me for a minute, processing what I said in slow motion, and finally said, "I'll ask the campers if they know." And I said, "Okay, we'll drive safe." He then walked to his van and started it up, but instead of leaving, he just sat there watching us, never looking away. Occasionally he would race the engine, but he never moved. It was a very uncomfortable 15 minutes while we finished packing. He finally left when I took the shotgun from the tent and I propped it up against my truck so that he could see it. We watched him drive down the road and off the mountain, bottoming out several times on his way out. And then my wife turned to me and said, "Did you see the skin around his eyes?" I said, "No, but I noticed the nonstop sweating in this freezing weather, and he did not have a jacket on." She said, "No, when he talked, instead of crow's feet in the corner of his eyes, it was almost like he had scales." I just laughed and I said, "No more fish for you." Of course, she got mad and said, "No, it really was scales on his face." We then started to pack stuff back into the truck. I remember saying that I would pack the guns last because we were going to stop on the way down and do some target shooting. It had been 10 minutes at most since the van had gone when I heard it. 100 yards away, where the van was first parked, I heard the sounds of 2, maybe 3 people talking. But at that distance, I could not make the words out, just that there was one deep voice and one that was not so much deep, and they were just mumbles. I thought that it could be a dad and a son coming to fish, but I didn't see them drive up, so they had to have hiked at least 2 miles to get there. It didn't really make any sense. I turned to my wife and I said, "I don't believe this. We have been here 30 plus times and we've never seen anyone. Now today we're running into more people than ever." The mumbling became a little louder, but I could still not make out the words. I strained to see them walking towards us as they should have been in sight by now. I could tell that they had separated because the mumbling became louder and was now coming from 2 directions. Straight ahead was the deep voice, and off to my left was the softer tone. I could still not see either one, but they sounded real close. Their talk was loud enough for me to make out, but it didn't make any sense. Now that I could hear it, it wasn't English. It was just mumbling. Then the deep voice started to talk. He had to be maybe 40 yards away, but still advancing. I couldn't see him, so I walked around the camp to get a different angle, but I still couldn't see anything. And then it made a sound like howls on today's internet. It was loud, and I could even feel the sound waves push on me like at a loud concert. It went on for several seconds. I'd never heard anything like that, not a mountain lion, not a bear, not anything. I had backed the truck into the campsite so that we could load it better. The front of the truck was pointing towards the sounds. I reached into the truck and I honked the horn several times. In addition, my wife grabbed 2 tops of her pans and was using them like cymbals. We just wanted to make enough noise that it would go away. After a full minute of this, we stopped and we listened. It was completely silent. And we stood there listening for another few minutes and the sounds seemed to be gone. I then decided that I should go back and look and make sure that it was gone. At the time, I always considered myself an apex predator. I was basically carrying an elephant gun. It was total overkill for anything in the Northwest, but like I said, I'm a pretty big guy and it was easy for me to shoot the gun. I loaded up the Weatherby and started to walk towards where the sound came from. And out of the corner of my eye to the left, I saw something flying my way. At first, I thought it was a grouse that had got scared out of the tree, but it turned out to be a rock the size of a soccer ball. It was flying at one point 20 feet above the ground, and then it landed and rolled to about 15 yards in front of me. I remember my mindset was that if you did cross paths with something like this, just let them know that you're there. So I walked over to the truck again and I started honking the horn once again. I felt at the time that this was more of a warning, not an attack type of a situation. And when I stopped honking the horn, all the sound was gone. Nothing for 5 minutes, and then 10 minutes passed. There was no movement, no smells, no nothing. After this, I made some strange decisions. First, we packed the rest of the truck and we got ready to leave. But there was still a couple of things to do. One of the traditions we always follow is to bring a 10-pound bag of apples. On the last day, we would cut up the remainder and spread them out around the campsite. Apples or any kind of fruit up in the woods will be long gone before it rots. I had this big bag of apples and I left the rifle in the truck. My wife sat in the cab with the doors locked. I told her I had to check the brush out for signs as I spread the apples. I was far more curious than I should have been. I told my wife to watch me when I was walking and if anything moved behind me to honk the horn. I searched under the brush for any signs, but the ground was hard and full of pine needles, making a track hard to see. After several minutes of looking, I found nothing. I then went back to the thrown rock and I tried to remember the path it had followed in the air and I traced it back to its origin. There was still dirt on half of the rock, so it was partially in the ground just a few minutes ago. I walked back in the woods about 40 yards when I found where the rock had come from. There were no tracks, just scuff marks, lots of these scuff mark signs everywhere around the rock location. I would estimate the rock weighed 25 pounds. I went over to the snowbank to get KC, and that's when I saw the track in the snow. It was a bare footprint 4 inches longer and wider than my size 16 extra wide. In the 3 days since we arrived, KC must have started to decay, and the odor was attracting whatever this thing was. I turned to my wife and I said, I'm going to bury KC here and now. He loved it here, and if something wants to eat him this bad, well, he's past caring. She, of course, objected a lot, but I told her I felt it was the 100% right thing to do. Besides that, whatever was out there was going to do what it wanted, and all we could do is just react. At some point during our stay, I had noticed a deep test hole someone had dug to test water or something. The hole was 5 feet deep and plenty big enough that I could cover KC deep in the ground. I brought KC to the grave while my wife followed with the rifle, and I began to get the grave cleared out while my wife gathered wildflowers to lay on KC's grave. Finally, I lowered KC into his grave, and I laid 5 large rocks over his body, and I covered him with soil almost to the top of the hole. We performed a short ceremony saying goodbye to a great dog and left the grave covered with wildflowers. Then we headed to the truck, and it was time to leave. We settled in the truck and buckled our seat belts, and I dropped the transmission into drive to pull ahead. That's when I looked out the windshield, and on the hood of the truck were 3 beautiful large yellow wildflowers. We had not put them there. Neither of us had even seen any yellow wildflowers in the area. I slowly got out and I placed the 3 wildflowers in the back seat. I wanted to keep them. My wife was very upset and demanded that we leave that minute, which we did. I have been back to the exact location over 30 times since. Nothing has ever happened there even close to being strange. Every trip I made to this place since has been as normal as any trip I had taken there before. My ex-wife refused to ever go back there, and she never did. To me, it's just a quiet mountain setting. But even though the camping spot was only a couple of 100 yards away from where I buried KC, I have never returned to the grave. Several times I've tried to walk over there, but I just couldn't do it. I'm now in my 60s, and I have decided that the next time I go back, I will go check on KC's grave. I wonder if he is still there. And that's the end of the story. And I have several questions about this story, and I'll just pop them off. And you may have questions too. But I'm wondering where this guy who showed up early in the story, I wonder how he fits in with all this. Is that like an alien gray connection with Bigfoot? I'm wondering if the writer, I don't know, maybe he could comment under here if he wants to. If he doesn't want to, that's not a problem. But I'm not confused. It's a great story and it's intriguing. It's kind of a mystery. You know, you don't really know exactly what's going on, but it's a really cool story. So, but eventually it got around to Bigfoot, and Bigfoot was either looking at the carcass of KC and looking for a meal, or it had sympathy for this couple and left flowers on the hood of the truck. Maybe that was it. I don't know. Sometimes these mysterious stories are best just left like they are, and you just keep wondering, and you can decide what it's all about all on your own. So however you interpret this story is up to you. All I know is that Stephen wrote a great story, and man, I loved reading this. Steve, thanks for sending this. I know we all enjoyed it, and I really appreciate it. Thank you, sir. This gentleman doesn't want to share his name, and that's no problem, but here's what he writes. This is a good little story. I pray you and your family are well and happy. Thank you, sir. I appreciate that. Here's a short story about a visit from a big, tall, hairy, black Bigfoot. To this day, I shudder at the thought. We bought a small farm in the rolling hills of Florida. Yes, there are rolling hills in Florida. We decided to have a home built there, and while it was under construction, I went alone to visit the site. It was the middle of the afternoon, and I was surveying the progress of the house. I was standing in what would eventually be the living room, looking out yet to be an installed window, when I caught sight of something. It was at least 8 foot tall and covered in black hair. Despite my disbelief, I knew it was a Bigfoot. He was casually moving through the side yard. His arms were swinging as he went. I froze in place with my heart pounding in my chest as I tried to figure out what I should do next. He apparently felt my stare, and he turned to look my way. This thing was no more than 15 or 20 feet away from me. I fell to the floor and pressed myself against the window wall, and I curled into a ball. I could only hope that he wouldn't smell my scent. He started walking towards the house, and I could hear his footsteps as he approached. The closer he got, the more my fear mounted. Not knowing if he could smell me, I remained in my hiding place, pressed against the wall under the window. I heard him getting nearer and nearer, and my heart beat faster and faster. I was well aware that he had only to reach through the window to grab me. The window opening was easily twice wide enough to pull me through. My chest hurt from the pounding of my heart, and my breath was coming in ragged, shallow gulps. The next thing I knew, I was alone. I had fainted. I have no idea what he did or didn't do when he got to the window. After we moved in, we decided to raise chickens. We had a 20 foot by 20 foot by 10 foot high coop built. The base was steel up to about 3 feet off the ground and about 1 foot into the ground. The rest is all made of 1/2 inch to 1 inch chicken wire. We purchased 30 hens and 2 roosters to start off with. I would sell the eggs to pay for the feed that I would buy for them. It was a nice hobby that pretty much paid for itself. One by one, the chickens began to go missing. Over time, the number of chickens began dwindling until I finally only had 5 left, and I had to buy more to replace the ones that we had lost. Once I was back up to 30 hens, I was back in the egg selling business again. But a year later, we're back down to 5 chickens. I'm about to give it up because I have no idea who or what is taking our chickens. There's never any evidence of anyone or anything being there. I don't know what to think. I know it isn't raccoons because they will tear a chicken to bits right on the spot. Twice over the years, I've had a raccoon come out of the woods in the middle of the day and get one of my chickens, so I know. I don't know about getting another 30 hens, but if I do, I probably won't ever let them get out of the big barn-like building we had built for them. I'm at a loss, but I can't forget what I saw that day when the house was still being built. We have a lot of strange things around here. We had a small pond with a fountain near our pool. One day I was walking out in the yard and saw something strange in it. Leaning over to get a better look, I was shocked to see an alligator. We've also recently adopted, well, more like been adopted by 7 peacocks. So who knows what goes on in those woods behind our home. One night I heard a commotion in the backyard. I shined my flashlight around and about 6 to 7 feet up I saw glowing red eyes. There were no trees or posts there, so I don't know what I was seeing, but it blinked at me several times. I just walked slowly back into the house wondering what it may have been. My chicken thief, perhaps? Maybe. Thanks for being such a great narrator on your channel. Well, you're welcome. You're awful welcome, but I'm not a great narrator. A lot of people report seeing these half-human, half-gorilla things. One day I may tell you how they came to be if you don't already know. Thanks again, and God bless you and your family and your viewers. Well, thank you for the story, sir. Man, Bigfoot activity in Florida and all kind of strange things going around your place. And I have chickens, and I don't know. I don't really keep up with them too much, but we've had as many as 30 or 40 chickens. I think I'm down to about a dozen right now, but they're just old and dying off. But when they die, we find them either in the coop or laying in the yard somewhere. And I'll tell you this, and this is kind of odd. When I find one dead, normally I throw them on a burn pile, where we burn old limbs and stuff 3 or 4 times a year. But sometimes I'll just take them out in the wood and throw them out there for the predators to get. And those chickens will lay there sometimes for days before something gets them. I would think that the coons or the coyotes or foxes or something would get them right away, but I don't know what the deal is with that. But anyway, it's a great story. I really appreciate it, and thank you very much. Okay, just in conclusion to wrap this video up, here's what's going on. And I don't tell y'all much about what goes on in my life because who really cares? Nobody cares. Over the last year through this pandemic, my work has run really low, and it gave me time to do a lot of videos and actually start another podcast, the What If It's True podcast. And I love. I built a website. I just love working on all this stuff. Now I'm busy again, and I've got the YouTube podcast with Dixie. I've got the What If It's True podcast, and I've got the website. And I'm now recording some audiobooks written by some very nice authors who've invited me to record their audiobooks. And I'll make sure and let y'all know when those are available. But they're great stories and I'm loving doing it. But here's the deal. I didn't have a lot of work to do, so I kind of poured myself into this YouTube podcast website thing, and I got all that done. Now that I've got it all set up, I'm having a hard time finding the time to keep up with it. But I will, and I just don't like keeping on a schedule. This is really a hobby for me. But here's what I've done to help me with the podcast, the What If It's True podcast. I have a partner in crime. I've got someone who's going to be helping me, and I'll tell you her name when she debuts in the podcast, but she's a wonderful narrator. She's got a pretty voice, and it's just something different than my old redneck voice. And so we'll sprinkle my stories in and her stories in and kind of throw a little change in the podcast. She's helping me edit a lot of these stories. She's just been a huge help, and I'll introduce you guys to her in the What If It's True podcast, probably in the next week or so. And I've already got 3 stories she's narrated, and they're wonderful. They're awesome. So that's kind of what's been going on. And I told you that I've got a huge project that I've just got released on. And so I'm going to be real busy for the next 2 or 3 months. Then crappie season will come in. It's going to be spring and the crappies are going to be on. But even with all that going on, I'm still going to be cranking out videos. They just may not be 2 or 3 a week. It may be 1 a week or whatever. So hang with me, have fun with me. That's all this is. This is just a lot of fun. I don't take it real serious. I don't feel like I'm on a schedule. And I was telling my new partner, at what if it's true that, look, if this isn't fun, it ain't worth doing. And that's the way I see this. So I'm having fun with it. As long as I'm having fun with it, I'm going to keep doing it. So you guys hang with me. We got plenty to come and lots to do, and I'm having a great time, and so is she. We just love doing this, and we appreciate you guys. So thanks for listening to this video, and we'll see you guys on the next one. Thank you.